Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of PMP's Den of Antiquities. Today, we're here to talk about Ahsoka Episode 6, and honestly, I thought this was a great episode. Last week's episode was phenomenal and amazing, and I was a little worried that it wasn't going to match that same kind of vibe going into Episode 6, but I felt like they kept the pacing very well, and it left me, honestly, with more questions than answers, which I always think is a good thing. But we start off with Ahsoka and Huyang traveling through hyperspace with the Purgles, and it's always cool to see like hyperspace travel. This one's a little different because it has more like reds and orange and blue and kind of yellow mixed in, whereas like regular hyperspace is just usually blue and white. So I thought that was kind of cool. And I really like the dialogue between Ahsoka and Huyang. I like the nod between the different eras of Star Wars. She's talking about the stories that he used to tell all the Padawans, and he said series story 1, 2, and 3, meaning like the prequels, the original trilogies, and then the sequels. And then Ahsoka goes 1 being the best. I like that little nod, and then I really appreciate how he starts the story, which is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, which is, every single Star Wars starts off with that. So it's kind of cool that he's telling the story of Star Wars. And not only that, but I really like that they're still trying to weigh the decisions of Sabine, and that she wasn't really ready to make the decision to sacrifice Ezra in order to stop Thrawn from coming back. And I'm really excited to kind of see Ahsoka and Sabine meet up again and kind of deal with the turmoil that has happened. I think next episode's going to be this one's set up next episode to be epic. And then the episode cuts to Peridia, which is honestly a pretty interesting planet. We get to see that ring. It's just a regular ring, has rocks and debris and stuff like that. And then when you zoom in, you find out it's basically the ring is a graveyard of like whale ribs and skulls and just different types of bones, because that's where the Purgle go to die. And we don't know whether Thrawn killed them all or the Night Sisters killed them all, or if that's just where they go because the Purgle's hop from planet to planet to planet until they get to Peridia, which is, I guess, their resting place, which I feel like is honestly pretty fitting for the home of the origins of the Night Sister. It's very eerie. And then we go down onto the planet, which is very like high fantasy, like Tolkien inspired. I feel like it very like Twin Towers, if you guys have seen that movie. And you have like these giant like Night Sister towers that have like either like a crying face or a screaming face, which we don't know whether they're prayer altars or just observatories or whether they live in them, but very spooky and ominous. And I really like the way that they've built this world. The world building in this episode is really cool. And then we get live action Night Sisters, which if you're a fan of the Clone Wars, it's a really huge throwback and something that we've all kind of wanted, because, we get Morgan Elsbeth, which if you guys haven't been to like the round tables and the watch parties, we say that Morgan Elsbeth is like the country white girl of the Dathomir, because she's not quite a Dathomirian. So she kind of seems like she's like almost like a sub-variant of the Dathomirian, but she has like, we always joke and say like she has like the Western white girl name. But it was cool to actually get real like live action Night Sisters. They had the red robes, they had the black eyes, they had the like shifting echoey voice like Mother Talzin has. If you guys don't know, Mother Talzin is the like head Night Sister in the main Star Wars galaxy. She is the mother to Darth Maul. She basically creates Savage. Ventress was one of her like disciples. Like she goes way back. She has ties with Palpatine. Like it's crazy how connected she is. But they got a lot of her vibes for the origins of the Night Sisters. They have the creepy fingernails, the black eyes, like just an all around like an awesome job and a really cool Clone Wars nod. They've done a lot of like Clone Wars, like I wouldn't even say like fan service, but maybe you can consider it fan service, but really paying homage to the Clone Wars fans, which I think is like super awesome. Davis like knocking it out of the park with all this stuff. And then we get a moment where Balin and Shin are alone. I'm guessing Morgan Elsbeth is going down with the Night Sisters and like looking at the catacombs and checking out their like whole operation. She mentions that later on when she talks to Thrawn, but I really love the dynamic of Balin and Shin. Like, we don't have all the answers yet. It's very mysterious of what Balin's looking for. You know, something is calling to him. Maybe he doesn't even know what it is, you know, but something's calling to him that is greater power beyond anyone's imagination. So I'm wondering what that's gonna be. He has, it seems like from he was at the temple when it all went to crap, you know, from seeing his order fall to seeing the rise of the Empire. He talks about how the cycle repeats, and it kind of reminded me almost of like Daenerys from Game of Thrones, how she's like, oh, I don't want to be on the wheel, I want to break the wheel. It kind of seems like Balin's kind of on that similar trajectory where he doesn't want to just keep repeating the same process. Like, he's not in it just to be like Thrawn's like bodyguard or like to have some of the power that Thrawn has. Like, he wants something even greater than that. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. And I really love that Dave is like slowly giving us all the answers, but he's not giving everything right away. And then we get the epic shot of the Chimera coming over the tower. And this was just a classic shot. I mean, they've done this so many times, from A New Hope to Rogue One, where the Star Destroyer is coming overhead and you get to see the epicness of the Thrawn's Chimera. And small plug here, if you guys are interested and love that design, I sell these 3D prints that you can get. You can put them any which way of Thrawn's Chimera symbol on the bottom of his Star Destroyer. You can put it on a wall with some 3M tape, or you can put it in a glass Detolf cabinet like I have back here, or on a desk, or however you like. But just want to let you guys know that I do sell those merch, and it'll be down below in the bio. But yeah, it was super cool to see his Chimera, and it looked like it had been repaired by some of the Night Sister, either metals or magic. I'm not quite sure yet. But you really get to see how much damage the Purgles and traveling through hyperspace caused at the end of Rebels. You know, because the Purgles take the ship and transport him and Ezra to Peridia. And it was really cool to see Thrawn's kind of like night troopers, which are like stormtroopers mixed, like imbued with like Night Sister magic. They're all chanting his name. And the troopers are basically pieced together by, you see like some of the red like Night Sister ribbon wrapped around them. It echoes like the gold in their armor and the cracks is actually an old Japanese form called kintsugi, which basically they would make the pottery, they would break it, and then they would repair it with gold. So it would have all where the cracks are would have these gold inlays. So I really like that that's a real world thing that they brought into it. And the troopers look phenomenal. Some of them have like gray masks, some of them they're just white with that. And then we get to see Enoch, which is the captain of the guard for Thrawn, and that design's different. You know, I'm not gonna hate on it, because it's very like Gladiator-esque. You know, it almost reminds me of the movie Gladiator with I'm blanking on the guy's name that has the silver mask, but it's very reminiscent of that. The helmet's just different. His armor set looks amazing. It's very cool. He almost runs like a tank trooper a little bit, especially in his helmet where the nostrils kind of come down. It's very tank trooper-esque, but the helmet's not a bad design. I think I just would have preferred it to be like those gray troopers in the background, where instead of the faceplate being gray, it's just solid gold. I think that would have been just as cool. But hey, like I said, to each to your own. If you love it, that's awesome. So, and then we get to see Thrawn, which I love that they got the voice actor from Rebels to reprise his role as Thrawn. Like, the voice is on point. I personally really liked the look, and I really love that you can tell that they've been there for quite a while, because you can see like his clothes are tattered in certain areas around like his collarbone and around like just certain areas. Like, you can tell they're trying to do the best they can with what they have, and he even mentions that later in the episode with Morgan. And then as a Rebels fan, for me personally, it was kind of cool seeing Sabine and Thrawn interact with each other. You know, the Thrawn is so menacing, and he's always like, we always call him like the Sherlock Holmes of the Star Wars universe, because he's always like 6 steps ahead. You know, he's letting her go find Ezra so he can eliminate Ezra and her, and hopefully get rid of Balin Shin in the process. You know, he's always playing those chess moves, and it was just awesome to see that. But we get Sabine and Enoch going down to, like, I guess, like the lower levels of the tower, and we get to see a howler, or at least that's what Ezra calls the wolf, the dire wolf kind of looking thing. And I thought that was cool that it wasn't necessarily a dire wolf, but it kind of has resemblances to them. And for those who don't know, dire wolves are a big part of Rebels. Kanan kind of turns into a dire wolf and kind of becomes one with the Force with one, and then Ezra has a lot of history with those dire wolves too. So it was kind of cool to see a pseudo kind of live action one, and not to mention how cute it is. It acts like a dog, and it's just the cutest thing. But she goes out, she ends up finding these bandits, which I thought were really cool. They're like a pseudo of like Tusken Raiders and like samurai almost. They also kind of look like that one smuggler or transport guy from The Force Awakens. So I thought that was kind of cool how they were adding all those elements in. And I really like that, you know, she's using her blaster, she's dodging with her Beskar, and then she takes out the saber. And I really love how rusty and almost like barbaric she is with the saber. Like, it constantly feels like she's struggling to use that saber. She's making it work because she's a warrior, but she's constantly struggling. It's very clunky, it's very janky, but it was cool to see the green and her fighting, and I really like that they're adding those scenes in there with her. And then the episode flashes to the night troopers like pushing these hovering cargo like pallets. And I don't know about you guys, they could be artifacts, they could be relics. I think there's some type of undead, whether they're the undead troopers that were on the Star Destroyer from the voyage, whether they're like undead Night Sisters, or whether there's something completely different. Like, the shape of it looks almost like, you know, when Han Solo gets frozen in carbonite, it almost kind of looks like that size. It looks like it's a human sized, like almost like sarcophagus or something like that. So I'm really curious to see what's going on with that. I don't really understand the dynamic between Thrawn and the Night Sisters. The Night Sisters seem to kind of have allegiance with Thrawn and think that he's the future or something like that. They mention that, you know, the threads that they're looking into like speak to him being like the next thing, or like the next, like the threads speak it, so that's why they follow him. And I'm really curious to see their dynamic and how they play out, because the Night Sisters definitely had a hand in like reviving Thrawn's like army and ship and keeping them alive for all those years. But then we get Morgan and Thrawn talking about sending Balin and Shin off to go find Ezra and Sabine and like eliminating them. And I really like this. It really shows Thrawn's character when Morgan questions him about sending like patrols out after Balin and Shin. He kind of like, you can tell he doesn't like that she questions him. He pauses for a minute and kind of collects himself. And I like how calculated he's like. He's not like an overreactive person. He's very like, he'll stop, he'll think, and then he'll speak, you know. And I just really love it. Really shows his character and how awesome he is. This is a little small portion of the show, but I really like the dynamic between Sabine and the Howler. Like when he just runs off and abandons her and then comes back, he's like, it literally is like a dog when like you like scold a dog or a dog does something bad. He kind of like bows his head. It's like, please forgive me, like I'm sorry. And you know, she ends up forgiving him, and they go to this rocky area, which ends up having, I don't know if they said the species is like the hermit crab looking guys. Some people had a problem with the way that they look. And I personally really like their design. You know, I don't think it's out of left field to have some like tiny indigenous creature help the hero continue on their journey to find their goal. You know, we have Princess Leia with the Ewoks. We have the Lurmen in that one Clone Wars episode with Anakin, Ahsoka, and Isla Secura. I don't know. I don't think it's, you know, some people had a problem with it, but I thought that was kind of a cute little thing. And then we get to see their village, which is basically just like, they look like they're scrapped RVs. Like they're living in a trailer home. But I guess that's because they have to move so much. You know, Ezra mentions a little later on in the episode that they don't stay in places for long. I'm guessing because maybe they're hunted by the Night Sisters or the Howlers, because the Howlers seems to want to eat them like all the time, and that's also a little funny thing. We finally get live action Ezra. And man, I called it. We were doing a watch party on my buddy Strike's channel, and I was like, I don't know. I was like, maybe we'll get Ezra with like a beard and like some long hair, you know, and see him kind of age, and it won't be like a seamless thing. And sure enough, he didn't have quite as long hair, but he did have a beard. So I was like, oh yo, I was like, I definitely called that. But their reunion was cool. I like the look of Ezra. I think that guy killed it. He definitely did his research. He acts just like Ezra, and I really think he pulled off a nice performance, and I'm excited to see going forward, to see if his powers really grown. At the end of Rebels, we see him pushing ATSTs off like platforms, and you know, he's holding Thrawn in place, and we really get to see him become like level up as a Jedi. So I'm curious to see maybe if he's learned some stuff from being on this planet that was originally hosted by like the Night Sisters, and I'm curious to see how he stacks up against Balin and Shin. I really think that's going to be an interesting, instead of having, we'll have Ahsoka, Ezra, and Sabine kind of going up against these big powerhouses, and I think that's going to be really cool for the next episode. But that about wraps it up for this episode. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I love hearing your theories and what you guys thought about the episode, so leave that down below. And as always, make sure to come by and hang out. We're talking Star Wars at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. This Saturday, we're talking about this episode. We love hearing y'all's feedback. And last week, y'all were really popping off in the chat. We were having a blast with it. So come on by and hang out. And as always, may the Force be with you.